What does it all mean?
This is where the archaeology has been found.
Oh, hi, how are you? Look at that.
I need a planter.
A shrine to a belly button.
This is a rock skull? Look at that.
No one gets into this place. No one.
Whoa, don't take me too far.
Now that's naked archaeology.
Biblical archaeology doesn't get better than this. I'm in the Galilee, northern Israel. I'm at Tel Dan. The Bible tells us that a tribe named Dan conquered this place. They dig, and what do they find? The city of Dan. As I stand here, I'm not thinking, wow, what a synchronicity between the Bible and archaeology. But instead, I'm thinking about a babe, a legendary babe, Helen of Troy. That legendary beauty that launched 1,000 ships, caused this big war. Troy ended up burned to the ground. Why am I thinking of that legendary historical beauty talked about by Homer? Because the people that chased her down and brought her back to Greece, we call Mycenaeans or Greeks. They call themselves, according to Homer, Danoi. And I'm wondering, are the Homeric Danoi, the people of Helen of Troy, and the biblical Danites who built this place, are they one and the same people? Could the Danites who lived in Canaan, modern-day Israel, really be related to the Danoi who lived in Mycenae, modern-day Greece? Let's see what we know about these two peoples from the ancient texts. In Homer's Odyssey, we discovered that the Danoi are migrant people. Even the word Odyssey is literally associated with these migrants. Second, we learned that they are mighty warriors that chase Helen by ship to Troy. Even the great Achilles fights in their ranks. Third, they are expert craftsmen who build the famous wooden horse that fools the Trojans. And finally, the Danoi are pagans who worship many gods. In the Bible, we find a similar profile for the Danites. We first hear about them in the story of Moses when he leaves Egypt with his 12 tribes heading to the Holy Land. Moses partitions Canaan and gives a portion to each tribe. Judah and his people, the Judahites, get Judea. This tribe later becomes the Jews. The mysterious Danites decide not to take their share and instead are the only tribe to migrate. They head north with 600 skilled warriors to a town called Laish, which they conquer and rename Dan, modern-day Tel Dan. The most famous of the Danites is Samson, a mighty warrior, more similar to the Greek Hercules than other Hebrew prophets. We also learned that the Danites are expert craftsmen, chosen to build the sacred gold-laden Ark of the Covenant. The Bible then shuns the Danites for building a temple in direct competition to Solomon's temple, where they worshipped false gods. So in the ancient texts, the Danites and the Danoi sound quite similar. But many would find it foolish to connect these two groups who seemingly live far away from each other. In our search for the tribe of Dan, we have to establish something. Some people might think it's crazy to connect Danites to the Aegean, what's considered modern Greece. But is it so crazy? I'm standing at Ashkelon, a city with 5,000 years of history. There's Canaanite layers here, and there's Philistine layers here. And everybody agrees they were Aegean. They came across the Mediterranean, and they settled here. If the Philistines could do it, why not Dan? To get a better understanding of ancient migrations, I'm off to see archaeologist Aaron Mayer, who studied how the Philistines went from eating souvlaki to gefilte fish. A lot of people think that the Israelites are over here, they're in the Middle East. Greek people are, in Greece. The two don't connect. Is there a connection between the Aegeans and the Israelites?
There's an ongoing, multifaceted connection between the two regions. This is pottery that's made in Greece. All this reaches Canaan through trade.
Now, what about the Philistines?
When they first come, they're very strongly Aegean. Very soon, they take in a lot of these influence from the surroundings.
The Danite territory, biblically speaking, is close to the Philistine territory, no?
there may be some sort of connection between the Danites and the Philistines. Perhaps the Danites should be connected to the Danoi, who were one of the ancient peoples in Greece. Here you have maybe a connection. And then it says that you have Dan, Danite, and Dananoi, very similar, so maybe it's connection.
What do you think?
I definitely think there are elements in the biblical story about the Danites which tells us something of a connection with the Aegean. I'm still waiting for the
smoking gun.
So they could be the same people. But there's one problem. Homer writes that the Danoi are a seafaring people. The Danites, on the other hand, wander the desert for 40 years and then settle in Tel Dan, an inland site. They sound more like a seafaring people. And yet, there's a cryptic passage in the Bible that may be trying to tell us something.
He's a tall man. He's a tall man.
We've been searching for evidence that the biblical Danites, who lived in Israel, and the Greek Danoi, written about by Homer, were one and the same people. These two groups are strikingly similar in ancient texts. But there's one element that has kept us at bay. The Danoi are clearly seafarers. But living at Tel Dan, an inland site, the Danites sound more like land dwellers. And yet, the Bible does give us a cryptic passage called the Song of Deborah, which would seem to state that the Danites are seafarers. The passage describes a famous battle between the 12 tribes of Israel and their oppressors, the Canaanites, led by their general Sisera. In the passage, the Israelite leader Deborah leads the Israelites to battle. But one of those tribes, the Danites, does not join them. They stay in their ships. This passage has confounded biblical scholars. If they lived inland, why were they on ships? Could the Bible be telling us that the Danites, like the Danoi, are really seafarers? I've discovered that there was a coalition of seafarers at the time, appropriately called the Sea Peoples. The word on the docks is that they are a kind of ancient pirates scavenging the seas for treasure to loot. Can we connect the Danites to these sea peoples? I've come to Tel Dor, located on the northern coast of Israel. This archaeological site was at one time inhabited by the Checker, a sea peoples with connections to the Aegean. Their association with this place was written about on a famous Egyptian papyrus called The Story of Wenamun. I'm here to meet with archaeologist Ilan Sharon to find out who the Sea Peoples were.
Who were the Sea People?
The Egyptians fought against a coalition of sea peoples who are mentioned in about half a dozen Egyptian documents. The most famous document is the relief from the mortuary temple of Ramses III. On this relief, he shows two battles. One is a sea battle on the one side of the temple, and on the other side of the temple, you see a land battle.
Ramses III's mortuary temple, Medinat Habu, shows these battles in amazing detail. The relief even distinguishes between each group of sea peoples. There were the Peleset, associated with the Philistines, and their fellow Aegeans, the Checker, who we now know migrated to Tel Dor. And then there's a mysterious group known either as the Denyen or the Danu. Sound familiar? Could these be the biblical Danites? But wait, the reliefs show yet another group of sea peoples, the Shardana. Scholars generally agree they probably came from Sardinia. And there's an archaeologist who believes he's found them in Israel. His name is Adam Zertal. What Zertal has uncovered may also connect the Shardana to the Danites through that mysterious passage in the Bible, the Song of Deborah. Although it's raining buckets, Zertal is anxious to show me this unique site that he and his team have uncovered.
Well, this is a huge place. This is the city wall, the inner face of the city wall.
And what period is this?
This is exactly 1200 BC.
So about 3,200 years ago.
Yes.
which is exactly the time of the battle between the Israelites and the Canaanites. But Zertal has discovered something even more astonishing: the basis of former massive dome-like structures.
It's a round hut built of stones with a corbel dome as covering. This seems to be very typical to Sardinia.
And like the domes in Sardinia, the function of these mysterious structures has confounded archaeologists.
This is the most bizarre and mysterious civilization that I've ever seen. I thought it belonged to the early Israelites, but more and more it became clear that there's nothing to be between the Israelite early culture and these things. That you don't have any other parallels until you come to about 3,000 kilometers to Sardinia.
Amazing, unique dome-like structures whose only equivalent is found in Sardinia. And not only does this correspond with the time of the battle between Deborah and Sisera, but Sisera is not a Canaanite name. It's a Sardinian name. So the archaeology matches the biblical story. Now that we can connect three groups of migrating sea peoples, the Shardana, the Checker, and the Philistines, with the land of Israel, it's not so crazy to connect the biblical Danites with the Danu in Egypt and the Danoi in Greece. But why would we find the Danites all the way in Greece? Maybe, during the exodus from Egypt, some Danites traveled by land to Canaan, while others migrated north by ship to the Aegean. In order to prove that the fighters at Troy who built the wooden horse were actually Danites, we need to find this Israelite tribe in Greece.
He's a tall, tall man. He's a tall, tall man.
When the prophetess Deborah criticizes the tribe of Dan for not joining the battle, not fighting against Sisera, she says something that's historically very important. She's telling us, A, they didn't join, they're a marginal tribe, they're sometimes in the confederation, sometimes out, and secondly, they stayed in their ships. There's the Mediterranean, there are ships. What's she telling us?
That the Danites were seafarers. After leaving Egypt with Moses, some of the Danites may have migrated north by sea and ended up in an area of the Aegean called Mycenae, to become the Danoi written about in Homer's Iliad.
Land ho!
But can we find archaeological evidence of this migration? Amazingly enough, right after the Jews leave Egypt, vast quantities of gold mysteriously appear in Mycenae, in what are called shaft tombs. To add to the striking discovery, archaeologists believe this gold came from Egypt. But do we have a reason to think the gold came via the Danites? When the Danites helped build the Ark of the Covenant, they covered it in gold, so we know that they are expert goldsmiths. It would make sense that they would have brought their craft and their precious metal to the Aegean. If the Danoi are really Danites who went north to Greece after the Exodus, they would most likely have stayed in contact with their fellow relatives in Israel. If they did, we need to find a site in Israel that speaks to an Aegean connection. So I've come to Tel Dan, the most impressive Danite site of all. I'm here with archaeologist David Ilan, who has been digging here at Tel Dan for over 2 decades. The first piece of evidence I'm hoping to find to connect the Danites to the Danoi is examples of worshipping many gods, as the Bible claims.
Do we find examples of whoring after false gods that we hear about in the Bible?
We have a whole series of standing stones at Tel Dan. See that next to the wall over there?
Yeah.
5 stones placed up against the wall
Right.
that have no function.
You're telling me that this is not reinforcing the wall.
Nope.
And we could be touching the transition between paganism and monotheism because it's not statues, it's stones.
The question is, what are these stones? Now, there are 5 here. Why 5? 5 gods? I mean, we don't know of any group of 5 gods. I have my own pet theory, bare feet with 5 toes. And I think these are the feet of God, of Yahweh, as you enter into his home, which is located up the very top of the Tel. God is with us as we enter the site on pilgrimage.
So these feet, which lead us to the temple at the top of the hill, show us that the Danites ultimately worshipped one God, like their fellow Jews in Jerusalem, albeit in a slightly unkosher way. Have we found a departure from the Danoi? Surprisingly, although both worship standing stones, we find no examples of idol worshipping among the Danoi at Mycenae. So the Danites were kind of pagans among Israelites, while the Danoi were kind of Israelites among pagans. Once again, a perfect match. So why would the Bible say that the Danites worshipped false gods?
Is this a holy site?
This is a holy site. This is the home of God in the north.
This is a competition to Jerusalem.
This is the competition to Jerusalem. That's why the writer of the book of Kings and of Judges and Joshua is so down on all of these places. The writer does not view these places as legitimate places of worship.
The Danites are bad boys of the Bible.
That's right. The cult in the north was a competitor to the cult in Jerusalem. And the biblical writer is writing from a Jerusalem viewpoint.
So we are touching what the Bible considers the Danite sin. And you tell me it's the toes of God.
If David is right, these standing stones representing God's feet tell us of a people who worshipped a supreme God, similar to their fellow Jews in Jerusalem, but also like the Danoi in Greece. Maybe these feet can lead us to the temple the Bible states the Danites built as an answer to Solomon's temple in Jerusalem.
So here we are in a high place. This is the competitor to Solomon's temple.
Exactly. That's the beauty and that's the difficulty for the biblical writer. If you want to see an Israelite national cult place, the only place where you can now see that is here.
From the time that the temple stood in Jerusalem.
Exactly.
That's a big wow.
And many of the elements here replicate those that are described in the book of Kings. The platform, which would be where the temple was located. The fact that there are chambers all around it that contained smaller first fruits offerings altars. The altar with the horns.
The altar would have been that big?
This one is so big you could actually take an ox up there and slaughter it.
So over here we've got the altar, but that's all leading up to the Holy of Holies.
Would have been up there. I don't know, should we be going up to the Holy of Holies? You're not really allowed to do that.
Well, I wouldn't do it in Jerusalem.
This is the illegitimate cult. It's
That's
okay.
Right.
This is the main structure of the temple. This is where the deity would have resided. You have ceremonial behavior all around. Cymbals, drums, chanting. They were thousands of people looking and seeing what the priests are doing. From the priest's point of view, this was the real thing, and that might have been what got the people in Jerusalem so angry.
Incredible. A 3,000-year-old place of worship built in direct competition to Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, and the only Israelite holy place archaeologists have ever found from that time. But we still haven't found the smoking gun, physical proof connecting the Danites here with the Danoi in Greece. David Ilan has one more site to show me, an extraordinary tomb unlike other tombs in Israel. Could this resting place hold the link we've been searching for?
He's a tall, tall man. He's a tall, tall man.
I've been on a quest to find out if the biblical Danites might be related to the Mycenaean Danoi. We found plenty of parallels in the ancient texts that would corroborate this idea. The Bible tells us that the Danites were great goldsmiths who helped build the golden Ark of the Covenant. And in Mycenae, we discovered unique shaft tombs filled with beautiful gold objects that we believe connect them to the Danites. But we haven't found smoking gun archaeology in Israel, which explicitly connects the Danites to the Danoi at Mycenae. I'm in Tel Dan with archaeologist David Ilan, who has one more site to show me, a unique tomb, unlike other tombs found in Israel. Does this burial place hold the answer to our archaeological prayers?
I've waited so long to see this tomb. I've read about it, heard about it. They call it the Mycenaean Tomb. It's off the beaten track. Tourists don't come here. I'm very excited. I read so much about what was found in here and so on. What makes this tomb special or Mycenaean or anything like that?
It is a local variant of a chamber tomb. Most other tombs from this period are cave tombs carved out of the bedrock. This kind of massive, large, constructed chamber tomb is very unusual. There is a lot of Mycenaean pottery that came from this tomb. There was gold buttons and earrings and bracelets, lots of bronze weapons and tools, many Mycenaean vessels, some Cypriot vessels.
Is it locally made?
The clay that the Mycenaean vessels were made out of come from the region of Mycenae.
So the stuff you found here in Tel Dan, you know for a fact came from the Mycenaean region.
Right. There's an Aegean element here. At the same time, there are southern Israelite material culture elements here as well. There's an amalgamation here of the two, which in a way really is what the Bible tells us the Danites are. People that stay by their boats by the sea. They're a different group. There's something strange about them. They don't quite belong. And that may be because they're somewhat Aegean in background and in behavior.
So here we are at the end of our quest, at the site that directly connects the biblical Danites with the Homeric Danoi. In our search, we found textual and archaeological evidence corroborating the Danites' biblical journey. And we've discovered both the Danites and the Danoi were skilled sailors, expert goldsmiths, and had similar religious beliefs. Most importantly, we found the definitive link that bonds these two migrant cultures. A shaft tomb in which gold and other Mycenaean treasures were discovered that speak of a direct connection between Israel and faraway Greece. So it seems Helen of Troy was rescued by one of the tribes of Moses. Who would have thought?
Man the oars!
He's a tall, tall man from a tall, tall land.